My entitled ex started an affair, accused me of infidelity, and filed false claims of abuse to take our kids. So I hired a PI, proved my innocence, and won the case. Now she wants to reconcile, and my mother took her side, demanded I forgive and move on, so I cut ties with her, and my father filed for divorce. The gravel crunched beneath the tires as the van backed out of the driveway, taillights blinking a cheery red in the morning haze. He stood at the porch, hands in his pockets, offering a final wave as his wife pulled away with her sisters and mother, their weekend retreat already buzzing in the rearview mirror. The house felt quiet. That suited him just fine. Emile Forrester, watchmaker by trade and father by proud obsession, turned back toward the house with a contented sigh. The week had been a flurry of school drop-offs and last-minute packing chaos, but now, for 2 whole days, the home would belong to him and the kids. Just him, Maggie, and Leo, ages 8 and 6. Curious, loud, fiercely attached. They were waiting in the backyard, already knee-deep in blueprints made of crayon and duct tape. The old tree with its sprawling limbs had stood silent witness for over 40 years. It was time it hosted new memories. For hours, they hammered and balanced and laughed. Maggie handed him nails like a surgeon's assistant. Leo tried, unsuccessfully, to drill into a knot of stubborn bark and declared war on nature. Emile watched them from the top rung of the ladder, his heart impossibly full. His life might not have been glamorous, but it was grounded, honest, reliable. Like the watches he crafted with reverence, every piece had its place. That night, he tucked them into bed, their cheeks sticky with marshmallow from backyard esmores. He lingered in the doorway, listening to the rhythm of their breathing. There was peace here, earned and delicate. Then the text arrived. I know about your little secret. Leave before I get back. It sat on his screen like a live wire. No name, no context, just venom wrapped in casual punctuation. Emile's first thought was wrong number. His second, some cruel prank. His third was disbelief. He dialed his wife immediately. 1 ring. 2. Voicemail. He tried again. Then a third time. Nothing. He wrote, "What's going on? Is this a joke? Call me." Nothing. The house, once warm with leftover laughter, felt colder now. He sat at the edge of the bed, phone in hand, staring at the clock as minutes passed like molasses. Midnight came. No reply. The silence stretched unnaturally. By morning, he told himself it would be sorted out. Miscommunication. A misfire. But when her car pulled back into the driveway the next day, there was no smile. No soft reunion. She slammed the car door hard enough to rattle the windows. She stormed past him with fire in her eyes. "You're disgusting," she hissed, shoving a folded sheet of paper into his chest. It was a printed screenshot, his name circled beside a timestamp, photos from inside their house while she was gone. A woman's coat hung on a chair, a blurry reflection in a hallway mirror. "I trusted you," she said. "With our children. With everything." "What are you talking about?" he asked, stunned. "Don't pretend," she snapped. "My friend saw her. Here. In our home." He froze. "What friend?" "My childhood best friend," she spat, voice trembling. "She came by. She saw you with some woman. Blonde. Slim. Laughing in our kitchen. Like it was her place." It was surreal, like watching a movie where he was cast as the villain without reading the script. "There was no woman here," he said, slowly. "No one." Her eyes narrowed. "Save it for the lawyers." And just like that, she turned her back and went inside, leaving him in the doorway, mouth dry, chest hollow. For 3 days, the house became a battleground. Emile tried reason, logic, even silence. None worked. She screamed. He stood still. She cried. He offered water. She tore down their wedding photo from the hallway and hurled it at the floor. The glass didn't shatter. He almost wished it had. It might have felt more honest. "You're lying," she kept saying, voice raw. "You're always lying." Each time he denied the accusation, she grew more certain. Each time he demanded the name of the woman he supposedly entertained, she waved him off like he was beneath her. On the second night, she slept in the guest room. Their children slept between them in a fog of confusion. Leo clutched Emile's old pocket watch as if it were a talisman. Maggie kept asking why Mom was mad about a friend. He had no answer that made sense to an 8-year-old. None that made sense to himself. By the third day, Emile reached his limit. "If you honestly believe I cheated," he said, voice low, "if there's not even a sliver of doubt left in your mind, maybe you should leave." She stared at him like he'd struck her. But she said nothing. No protest. No indignation. Only that tight, quiet nod people give when they've been waiting to hear the wrong thing. The next morning, she was gone. The children too. She didn't slam the door this time. It closed like the final page of a book, soft and irreversible. Emile stood in the silence. The toys were gone. The refrigerator wiped clean of drawings. Even the smell of shampoo in the upstairs bathroom had vanished. For a week, he moved through the house like a guest in his own life. He worked in the shop out back, polishing gears, setting gemstones into timepieces, losing himself in the rhythm of hands and hours. It was the only thing that made sense. The precision. The control. Then the doorbell rang. 2 men in uniforms. Calm but firm. "Mr. Forrester, we're here on a court order," one said. Emil blinked, still in his apron, polishing cloth in hand. "What?" The officer handed him a sealed envelope. "Your ex-wife filed a report. Allegations of abuse." He laughed, genuine, startled laughter. "That's impossible. I would never." "We're not here to arrest you," the other officer said, carefully. "But until this is resolved, you are legally barred from contact with your children." It hit harder than the affair accusation. Deeper. Like a blade through marrow. He stood in the doorway, dazed, as the officers walked away. Behind them, the envelope felt radioactive in his hand. Divorce papers arrived the next day. A week ago, he was hammering planks with his kids, sharing peanut butter sandwiches under the shade of an oak tree. Now, he was legally alone. Stripped of rights, stripped of explanation. He went inside and closed the door. And for the first time since it all began, he cried. The waiting room was white, the kind of white that doesn't comfort but sterilizes. Emil sat alone, hands folded, eyes fixed on a water stain in the ceiling tile above him. Somewhere down the hall, his lawyer was making copies. Or maybe buying time. Emil wasn't sure anymore what people did when they left him alone. It had been 3 weeks since the police came to his shop. 3 weeks since his children vanished into an unreachable fog. The emergency custody hearing was over in 10 minutes. His wife, no, his ex-wife now, had presented claims of emotional instability, controlling behavior, and threats she said were just subtle enough to be invisible. The judge barely looked at Emil. The order was swift. Custody suspended. Supervised contact denied. Investigation pending. He'd left the courtroom stunned, followed by the vague murmurs of strangers who had already decided he was guilty. His lawyer, Diana Reeves, had taken his case pro bono at first. Her niece wore one of Emil's custom timepieces and vouched for him. That kindness meant more than she knew. But even she looked worried when new claims started to surface. "She's accusing you of financial coercion," Diana had said during their last meeting. "Claiming you hid money in off-books accounts, kept her dependent." "That's not true," Emil had said, for what felt like the 100th time. "She handled the finances more than I did. She had full access." "Then we'll prove it," Diana had said. But her voice lacked conviction. In the days that followed, the Whisper network began to hum. One client canceled a commission piece, citing complications. 2 others ghosted him entirely. The local guild, once a second family, issued a quiet statement distancing themselves from his workshop pending review of character concerns. No one called. No one asked. They had already chosen a side. He stood in the silence of his studio at night, surrounded by the skeletons of watches that would never be worn. He tried to work, but his hands trembled. His thoughts looped endlessly. What did she say to convince them? How much did she believe herself? Each night, he checked the email account he'd made for Maggie and Leo. He had given them the address years ago to send pictures and silly notes. He kept writing, hoping they might read them one day. "Today I repaired a timepiece from 1873. Took it apart. Cleaned each gear. I thought of Leo, how fascinated he was by the way everything fit together. I miss you both. I love you always. Dad." He imagined Maggie reading it in secret, tears wetting her sleeves. He imagined Leo asking where he was, and no one giving a straight answer. He imagined being forgotten. By the 5th month, he was hollowed out. Grief became routine. Silence, familiar. But through it all, he never stopped writing those emails. Never missed a day. 5 months. That's how long it took. 5 months of paperwork, court appeals, affidavits, psychological evaluations, and the mounting ache of unanswered questions. But finally, Emil Forrester was granted supervised visitation. 2 hours every other weekend. A room at a local community center. A neutral observer who sat quietly in the corner, notepad resting on her lap. It wasn't much, but it was something. When the door opened and Maggie and Leo walked in, Emil couldn't breathe. They looked taller. Maggie's face had lost a layer of baby softness. Leo's hair was longer, a little unkempt. They froze when they saw him, eyes wide, uncertain. "Hi," he said softly, kneeling so he wouldn't tower over them. Maggie's lip trembled. Leo took one slow step forward, then another. And then they were in his arms, the weight of them real and grounding. He closed his eyes, inhaling the smell of grass, glue, and whatever laundry detergent his ex had switched to. His heart thudded like a war drum. They cried. All 3 of them. Later, when they settled at a table stacked with board games, puzzles, and coloring books, the tension softened. But the questions began. "Why did you leave us?" Maggie asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't," he said, gently. "I never would have. Mom said you wanted to live with another lady," Leo blurted. "She said you picked her over us." The word struck Emil like a hammer to the chest. He looked down at their drawings. Maggie had started sketching a treehouse, but abandoned it halfway. I didn't pick anyone over you, he said slowly, careful not to let his voice break. There was never another woman. That was a mistake someone made. A very big one. They looked at him uncertainly, not as if they didn't believe him, but as if they didn't know what to believe anymore. Over the next few visits, the stories came out in fragments, like puzzle pieces scattered across time. Mom said you were dangerous. She said not to tell people we missed you. She said you'd get mad if we saw her friends. Emil sat with every piece. He didn't argue, didn't contradict, only listened, comforted, asked gentle questions. He began recording the sessions, not for retaliation, but for documentation. His lawyer advised it, and the community center permitted it with proper forms. The footage showed his children opening up, slowly undoing the knots tied by months of whispered poison. One afternoon, Maggie leaned in while Leo was busy building a Lego spaceship. She said you didn't love us anymore. Emil's eyes filled, but he smiled. I have never loved anyone more than I love you, and your brother, he whispered. Not in this life. Not in any. Maggie didn't cry. She only nodded, then rested her head on his arm. In that moment, Emil understood something terrible but clarifying. His children hadn't just been taken from him physically. They had been taken emotionally, too, taught to see him through a lens of fear and betrayal. Undoing that would take time. But now, at least, they had time. It was a Tuesday when Emil made the decision. The latest visitation had ended with Leo asking, "Why don't we live with you too?" And Emil, without answers, drove home in silence. He had spent months fighting battles with words, legal filings, statements, sworn affidavits. But words were never enough against rumors whispered in kitchens and schoolyards. Now, he needed proof. Real, irrefutable truth. He searched online for private investigators, narrowed it to 3, and finally settled on one, Elias Markham, a retired detective who specialized in family law cases and had a reputation for discretion. They met in a diner just outside town. I don't want revenge, Emil said. I just want the truth. Whatever it is. Markham nodded, sipping his bitter coffee. You'd be surprised how rare that is. In the weeks that followed, Markham dug deep. Bank statements, social media archives, cell tower pings, mutual acquaintances. Emil tried not to get his hopes up. Hope had betrayed him before. Then came the call. I've got something, Elias said. They met again, this time in Markham's cramped office. A folder sat on the desk. Thick. Markham opened it like a magician revealing a final trick. Photos. Timestamps. Testimony. His ex-wife had been seeing someone before the retreat. A man she'd reconnected with at a school fundraiser. Emails between them dated 2 months prior to the accusations. Flirtations turned explicit. Then plans. The weekend trip had been orchestrated not as relaxation, but as a convenient absence and alibi. The accusation of infidelity wasn't a reaction. It was a cover. And then came the real revelation. At a birthday party weeks after the split, the so-called childhood friend, the one who had supposedly seen Emil with another woman, had drunkenly confessed to making it all up. Just wanted to shake things up, she'd laughed to a group of acquaintances. Didn't think she'd burn the whole house down. The audio recording was poor, but the voices were clear enough. And several party guests were willing to sign statements confirming what they'd heard. Diana, his lawyer, reviewed everything twice, her eyes growing colder with every new page. We can file a motion to amend custody, she said. Immediate hearing. Emergency injunction if the judge agrees. This isn't just defamation, this is custodial interference, bad faith litigation, and possibly perjury. Emil didn't celebrate. There was no room for that. He only nodded. I just want my kids to know the truth. That evening, he watched the video again, Leo holding up a Lego creation, Maggie leaning against his shoulder. That was his truth. Not the folders. Not the accusations. Not the damage. The children were the only thing that mattered. And finally, the weight of lies was beginning to crack. The hearing took less than an hour. Elias Markham's documentation, the recordings from the visitations, and the party guests' sworn statements painted a picture even the most cautious judge couldn't ignore. Emil sat through it without flinching, jaw tight, heart a drumbeat of fear and hope. The court ruled for shared custody. Not full restoration, not yet. But half. Half the week. Half the holidays. Half the bedtime stories and science projects and dropped spaghetti on kitchen tiles. It was more than Emil had dared hope for. When he picked them up for the first time without a supervisor watching, Leo jumped into his arms before the car even stopped rolling. Maggie stood shyly on the porch, then ran after him, backpack bouncing. They came home. They're home. The house had been empty too long. Dust had settled like a film across everything: counters, emotions, expectations. Emil had spent the previous night cleaning obsessively, scrubbing away the months as though his children could smell the heartbreak in the carpets. He made their favorite dinner, grilled cheese shaped like stars and a tomato soup they used to call red lava. They ate without hesitation, Leo asking questions between bites, Maggie describing a book she'd read 3 times. That night, they curled up on the living room couch with mismatched blankets and an old projector casting cartoons on the wall. Emil didn't say much. He didn't want to break the fragile rhythm of joy re-emerging. He just watched them. Watched as they laughed again, trusted again, reclaimed him. The next morning, they built breakfast together. Pancakes, slightly burned. Maggie drew a smiley face in syrup. Leo insisted on cutting bananas with a butter knife. When they left for school, Maggie whispered, "Can you pick us up?" "I wouldn't miss it for anything," Emil said. And he meant it. The ex-wife kept her distance now. Communication came through a court-monitored app. Logistics only, pickup times, medical notes, school forms. No more emotional traps. No more poison words. She had not apologized. She never would. But Emil didn't need it. What he needed, what he fought for, was back, at least in part. The damage wasn't erased, but the healing had begun. One night, after the children were asleep, Emil sat in his workshop. The ticking of clocks filled the room like a symphony of second chances. He opened a fresh notebook. On the first page, he wrote, "Peace isn't the return of what was. It's the building of something new where trust can grow again." He didn't forgive her. He didn't hate her either. What he felt now was colder, cleaner, like the air after snowfall. It wasn't justice that soothed him. It was clarity. And with it, a slow but certain restoration had begun. It came from an unexpected number, an old acquaintance named Jules, someone Emil hadn't heard from in over a year. "Hey," the message read. "I was at a party tonight. Something happened. I think you'll want to know about it." Emil almost ignored it. He'd learned to expect nothing from people who had once smiled to his face and disappeared the moment the rumors took root. But something in the wording made him curious. He called. Jules answered, breathless, as if still recovering. "She said everything, man," Jules said. "The whole thing." "Who?" "Her," Jules clarified. "That childhood friend, the one who started all this. She got drunk. Loud. Sloppy. Started running her mouth in front of everyone." Jules went on to explain. The party was at a mutual friend's house. Familiar faces. Some from the guild. Some from the community. The kind of people who had once sent Emil polite, brittle emails telling him they hoped things would work out. In front of them all, the woman who claimed she had seen Emil with another woman at his house let it slip. No, announced that it had all been a lie. A petty manipulation. A joke that spiraled. She said, "I didn't think she'd actually believe it. I was just screwing around. Then your ex lost it. Lunged at her. They had to pull her off. It was chaos." The call ended with Jules saying, almost sheepishly, "I'm sorry I didn't reach out sooner. I didn't know what to believe. But I believe you now." Emil sat in his workshop after the call, surrounded by the quiet ticking of watches. He didn't cry. Didn't rage. He simply inhaled, held the breath, and let it go. It wasn't vindication he felt. It was something quieter. The next morning, the apologies began. People who had ghosted him. Friends who had crossed the street to avoid him. Colleagues who'd suspended commissions. Even his ex-wife's sister sent a carefully worded email asking to meet, for clarity and healing. He ignored them all. He wasn't interested in second chances from people who hadn't offered first ones. Where were they when he was being dragged from his own children? Where were they when he begged someone, anyone, to believe he was telling the truth? Now that the tide had turned, they wanted to ride it back to his good graces. But there was nothing left for them. He wasn't bitter. He was finished. When he picked up Maggie and Leo that weekend, Maggie asked, "Why are people being nice to you now?" Emil smiled gently. "Sometimes people wait until it's easy to be kind," he said. "But we don't have to be like that." Leo nodded solemnly, as if accepting a secret code of honor. That night, Emil deleted every apology message he'd received. He didn't respond to any of them. Not out of hatred. Out of principle. Some bridges don't need to burn. Some should never have been built in the first place. The knock came just after 6. Emil wasn't expecting anyone. The kids were upstairs, each building their own fortress of pillows in a friendly sibling war. The sun had barely dipped below the rooftops, casting the sky in amber. When he opened the door, his mother stood on the porch. She wore a soft smile, hands folded like a schoolgirl asking forgiveness before speaking. Emil's stomach sank. "I thought we could talk," she said. He didn't answer. "I've been thinking a lot," she continued. "About everything. About how things fell apart." Emil stepped aside reluctantly, but didn't invite her in. She took the cue and stayed on the porch. "I miss my grandchildren," she said. "I miss you." He nodded. "Then you should have believed me." "I did believe you," she said quickly, but her eyes betrayed her. They flicked downward. I thought maybe it would blow over. That she would calm down. That if we didn't escalate." "You chose silence," Emil said. She didn't argue. They stood in that awkward twilight, between forgiveness and finality. "I think," she began carefully, "that it's time you forgive her. For the kids." Emil's face hardened. "Forgive her," he echoed. "She's still their mother. They're caught in the middle. And you, Emil, you're teaching them to build walls." I'm teaching them to recognize boundaries, he snapped, and respect the people who respect them. His mother flinched, but pressed on. She's hurting too. So are war criminals, he replied coldly. Doesn't make them safe. There was a silence. Not peaceful, strained. Then she smiled again. Maybe we can all sit down. Together. One dinner. I think it would mean the world to them. Emil's eyes narrowed. Have you already invited her? The smile froze. That tiny flinch confirmed everything. You did. She just wants to talk. That's all. He turned away from the door. Don't do this, she said. Not over one dinner. But Emil had already called up the stairs. Kids, grab your jackets. They descended quickly, expecting a surprise outing. Instead, they followed their father out the back door, around the side, and into the car. Where are we going? Leo asked. Just dinner, Emil said. Not here. Only when they were driving did he tell them. Grandma invited someone without telling me. I wasn't okay with it. I want you to know that it's all right to walk away from people who disrespect your boundaries, even if they're family. Later that night, after the kids were tucked in, he took out his phone. He opened the family messaging app and removed his mother from the children's contact list. Then he blocked her number on their phones. It wasn't spite. It was protection. He loved his mother. But love wasn't enough anymore. She had chosen illusion over truth, control over healing. And he was done pretending forgiveness was owed to anyone who hadn't earned it. It was a cold Thursday evening when his father called. The kind of evening that whispered of winter's approach, long shadows and wind that hummed beneath window panes. Emil had just finished cleaning the dinner plates when his phone lit up. Dad. They hadn't spoken much over the last few months. Not out of anger, but distance. His father had always been a quiet man, reserved, hard to read, more likely to fix a broken latch than talk about feelings. But tonight, there was something different in his voice. You free for a drink, he asked. Emil hesitated, then said yes. They met at a small tavern on the edge of town, one they used to visit after long days at the old family workshop. It was almost empty, just a bartender and a couple playing cards in the corner. The air smelled like sawdust and old leather, oddly comforting. They sat in a booth by the window. Emil waited. His father didn't bother with pleasantries. I'm filing for divorce, he said. Emil blinked. What? I've already spoken to a lawyer. I move out next week. It took Emil a moment to find his voice. Why now? His father sipped his beer, looking out the window at nothing in particular. I watched what your mother did. What she allowed. How quickly she abandoned the truth when it got uncomfortable. And I realized I've been making excuses for her all my life. He glanced at Emil. When you were being torn apart, she didn't lift a finger. Didn't speak up. Just kept trying to smooth it all over. Pretend peace was the same as justice. I know, Emil said softly. His father leaned forward. But I saw you fight. With dignity. With restraint. You lost everything, and still kept your soul. That did something to me. Emil looked down at his drink. He didn't know what to say. I stayed with your mother because I thought it was the right thing to do. For the family. For the appearances. But watching you go through all of this, watching you not break, it gave me permission. Permission? Emil asked. To finally be honest, his father said. With myself. With her. I don't want to spend the rest of my life pretending things are fine. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Emil nodded. You're not the only one who thought pretending was safer. His father smiled faintly. We come from a long line of quiet men. Maybe it's time that ends with you. They toasted, clinking glasses softly. It wasn't a celebration. It was an acknowledgement. Of fractures that couldn't be fixed. And freedom that could finally be claimed. As they stepped out into the night, the air was sharp and bracing. Emil pulled his coat tighter. His father put a hand on his shoulder. You've lost a lot, son. But not everything. Emil looked at him, truly looked, and saw something new in his father's face. Respect. Pride. And for the first time in his adult life, Emil didn't feel like a son living in someone else's silence. He felt like a man who had earned his voice. The messages always came at night. They started as one-word check-ins, talk, or please. Then they grew longer, more erratic, swinging between apology and accusation. Sometimes she begged. Sometimes she raged. Other times, she pretended nothing had happened. Emil never answered. He read them, yes. His lawyer advised him to keep records. But emotionally, the words slid off him like rain on wax. He had nothing left to give her. No anger. No longing. No desire to be understood. Where once there had been love, and then betrayal, and then pain, now there was nothing. And that, he realized, was peace. She tried new tactics. Photos of the children. Nostalgic callbacks to early dates. Even a long, meandering email titled, For the Sake of Healing. He flagged it and moved on. The only communications he responded to were logistical. Custody schedules. Medical notes. School permissions. All filtered through the court-mandated app, kept formal and precise. He was polite. Professional. But completely, undeniably indifferent. With Maggie and Leo, though, he was all heart. They flourished. Leo brought home a certificate for a science project on magnetism, beaming like a lighthouse. Maggie had started journaling, sketching birds in the margins and leaving her notebooks open on purpose, hoping her dad would find them. He always did. And he always left a quiet note in the corner. Your words are strong. Or, your wings are growing. They talked more openly now. About school. About the divorce. About trust. One evening, Maggie asked, "Do you still love Mom?" He didn't rush to answer. He knelt beside her, brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. "I love the part of her that gave me you and Leo," he said. "But love and trust need to live together. If one leaves, the other doesn't stay long." She seemed to understand more than he expected. She didn't ask again. In time, he stopped checking the messaging app obsessively. He no longer worried about the next move, the next accusation, the next twist. That chapter was closed. Instead, he began writing again. Not the pleading letters to his children like before, but stories. Tiny tales stitched together in old notebooks. Fables of quiet fathers, brave children, and the tick-tock of hearts learning how to beat again. One he titled The Watchmaker and the Thief of Time. He never showed it to anyone. But in the final line, he wrote, "The opposite of love isn't hate. It's nothing. And nothing, when earned, is freedom." He smiled after writing that. Not because it was poetic, but because it was true. The past no longer lived rent-free in his mind. The grief no longer stole from his future. He had built something new, not with forgiveness, but with clarity, with intention. And for the first time in years, Emile Forrester felt free.